Hello, Laura.
Hello.
Hi there. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good, thank you. Everybody else, I think, will join in 5 minutes or so.
Okay.
So good to meet you.
You too.
And I'm going to just do one thing in preparation for the meeting. So,
Yep. I will carry on.
okay, I'm
No
going to turn off
problem.
my video for just a second.
Hello,
Hey, Steve.
how you doing?
Okay, how are you?
Good.
So
Good.
we're waiting, since this is an actual meeting of our committee, we have to have a quorum of members.
Oh,
Um, it's 4 people. And if we don't, then we can't have it as an official meeting, but what we could do is just pivot and turn it into a personal meeting, maybe with a different set of Zoom coordinates. But I anticipated most people from the committee would be here, so let's just wait a minute.
okay. That sounds good. For some reason, I look very, very red, don't I?
You look very red.
Yeah, this is global warming in action, people.
Yeah.
Let me see if I can fix that.
Hey, Ronnie, Anita.
You said Laura's here. If you said hello to her, she's my colleague.
I did. I said hello already. And I guess you all, I don't know if you want to, well, you'll take charge of the meeting. And if you want to have us do introductions, we can do that too.
Sure, glad to do that. Glad
So
to do that.
Jay is here. So it is 6:01. So normally we would start. We do have a quorum. We don't have a secretary for the meeting though, and I'm not sure, I assume you have slides, Steve, that we could use as the sort of minutes for
Yeah.
the meeting.
Yeah, we do. Everything will be there.
Yeah, so what we'll just do that, and I guess yeah, we're not going to try to log all the comments and questions that come up during the meeting. It's going to be a lot. Okay, so let's call the meeting to order, and I have to do roll call. So Anita,
Here.
Ronnie,
Here.
Jay,
Here.
Rebecca,
Here.
and Scott, I'm here. And so the one person missing is Lovey Taylor. So I guess we do need to have minutes for this meeting, and I can just make a note of that. Okay, and then we have looks like Dave Cardinal from the community, which is great. Okay, so the meeting is called to order. This is a special meeting of the Sustainability Committee. There's just one purpose for the meeting tonight, which is to work with Steve and Laura on the this En-ROADS simulation tool to learn about trade-offs related to climate change and technology advancement. We do have to have an open time for any things that are not part of the agenda. So this is oral communications. It's open to anybody on the committee or from the community who wants to speak about any topic related to our committee's work. And I would just ask you, if anybody has such a topic, to raise your hand, use the hand icon to indicate that. And if not, we can jump right into the primary purpose for the meeting. I don't see any. Oh, Laura, yes.
I have a question. There's no chat on this. Is that? Or I can't find it.
There is no chat, so let's see.
Yeah,
Yeah, and
right. There's no chat.
I was not able to launch the meeting as host, so I'm not sure who is the host on this. So I don't know how to create a chat.
I think there's not
function.
usually chat.
It
What's
would
that?
be, we would like to have a chat just for purposes of interaction. Sometimes we ask a question and ask everyone to write their answers, so we see simultaneous ideas. It's just really more of a participation tool.
So I'm not, that's great. I'm just not sure that we have the capacity to do that. Who can share? We can share, but it looks like this Zoom meeting was created without a chat function, it looks like to me. So that's unfortunate.
I think it may actually be one of the constraints of the public meetings that
Oh.
I don't know if you're supposed to actually have chat going on in
Well,
parallel.
fortunately, we're a small group, so we'll count on you to be vocal, and we like to have everybody pitch in. In fact, this is really not so much a presentation as a workshop.
Okay,
so
before
you'll
you
be
get
able to-
started, so I was trying to see if there are any other issues, topics
Sure.
not related to the substance of the meeting. So it sounds like the answer to that is no. And so given that, we can launch into the meeting, which is what we said. It's working with Steve and Laura. So take it away, Steve and Laura.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for coming this evening, whether you're on the committee or part of the community. We're very excited. Laura and I are volunteers with Citizens Climate Lobby, and we're also climate ambassadors with Climate Interactive. We've been trained to use this simulation model and to give a workshop about it, which is what we're going to do tonight. And we are very enthusiastic about this because we think it brings insight and knowledge to people who need it and allows us to think together and creatively about what it will take to really have a positive climate future, to have a planet that people can live on. So our process here will be, we're going to take you through the workshop that we would take any group through, to give you a chance to experiment hands-on with different climate scenarios and understand the dynamics of climate change on a global level. We're also going to then engage you on the committee to think about, what do you want to do with this tool? Should we share this with others? Do you want to take it on yourselves? And we want to tee up the question that, does the Portola Valley Town Sustainability Committee need to focus only on Portola Valley centric issues? Or can we bring people from the town to step into larger advocacy, larger activism for climate that goes beyond Portola Valley? So that's a question we're going to explore together. How does all that sound? Thumbs up? Sound good? Excited? Yeah? All right, great. So I will share my screen, and can I do that already, or do I need permission here?
I think you should be able to do it.
All right, let me get to the right place here and get ready for you here. All right. I'm going to go into slideshow mode. Get me out of the way. So can you all see this nice and bold?
Yep.
Choose your own climate future. And are you seeing some of the other windows that interfere? Or that's just maybe on me.
Well, I mean, I think each person can choose to have the speaker, in a small window, which I've got, but otherwise there are no other windows.
Okay, very good. All right, great. So we call this Choose Your Own Climate Future because we're going to show you how you can experiment with different options for how to create a livable climate. And our purpose today is to use this En-ROADS model, and it stands for Energy Rapid Overview and Decision Support, to provide a quick overview of what it is that actually shapes our climate system and the dynamics of climate change, and to support you to identify the really high value opportunities, the ones that really matter to create a more just and sustainable world. And our focus then is really, where should we collectively be focusing as a whole system on this planet Earth to have a livable world? The model is not based on any small geography. It's not Portola Valley, California, USA. It's a worldwide global model, but will show you the big forces that are operating worldwide that we need to reckon with in order to have a sustainable world. Now, we know that this group is more educated and informed about climate change than your typical public group. So we're going to skip some of the basics around, is climate change real? Is it a problem? And so forth. We'll just touch lightly on that because we're eager to use most of the time to give you a chance to play with this simulator and see what decisions you would like to support. So the simulator has been developed by Climate Interactive, a nonprofit, and in collaboration with the MIT Management School and their sustainability initiative. It's a very robust model. It's based on the latest science. It's updated monthly. It has 400 pages of backup about describing, all the assumptions and the models and so forth. And it operates very quickly in real time. It's a real breakthrough way to get people to understand the dynamics of climate change. So just as background, I think we all know that if we look back over the last 1,000 years, the first 900 years are pretty darn stable. Carbon emissions, the composition of the atmosphere, temperature was pretty even. And then the question is, what happened during the past 100 years? So anybody just tell me, what do you think is the big event that happened during the past 100 years that would change this flat, stable climate?
Industrialization with
Industrialization. And what is it about industrialization?
Coal-fired.
Coal, yes.
Fossil fuels, basically.
Coal, oil, and gas. That's right. The Industrial Revolution brought forth a huge increase in fossil fuels. And as fossil fuels went up, so did the atmospheric concentration of CO2, and so did the temperature. So we know that these rise together. I think everyone here accepts that. I think what's really striking about this is that, the organization 350.org, they were named because they said we can't exceed 350 without endangering the planet. Well, we're now up as of today to 418.30 parts per million, way beyond 350, and it's predicted to go higher. So change is upon us. It's dramatic. It's caused by fossil fuels. You can see the CO2 emissions by source. Land use has been pretty constant since 1850, hasn't changed much, but coal, oil, and gas, as well as this others is mostly methane from cement production and gas flying. They're the ones that have really contributed to climate change. And of course, as CO2 or other greenhouse gases become more highly concentrated, the sun warms the earth. The earth is used to radiating a good portion of that back out to space, but the blanket of CO2 here traps much of that heat, and that's what keeps the earth warm and makes it grow warmer. And when we say greenhouse gases, we're referring to carbon dioxide is the most well-known, methane, but there are others too: nitrous oxide, perfluorocarbons, sulfur hexafluoride, HFCs. All of these collectively are considered greenhouse gases. And in fact, in the field, we usually, since they're all different and concentrations and so forth, we refer to greenhouse gases in terms of carbon dioxide equivalents. So some of these are stronger and more damaging than others. Some are more common, but we're looking at greenhouse gases as a whole. So before I go on, are there any questions about this? Just to kind of check in and make sure everyone's tracking with us. Love to hear, or maybe I can just ask you to give me a thumbs up if you want to continue. I want to get some kind of response. Everyone ready to keep going?
The graph on the page before talked about land use. What
Yeah.
exactly do you mean by that?
It means agricultural practices, cattle production, or livestock and methane that comes from that. Also,
So not the actual like building of houses and cities and that sort of thing.
no, more when land is used, when trees are planted or cut down and so forth. All of that was stable for a long time. We had forests.
I would have
Right.
thought, yeah, it's surprising to me that it was stable in the sense that, the population of the earth was so much lower. So people were having a much bigger per capita impact on land use, I guess. It's just surprising. It's surprising it hasn't also shown a growth.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I don't have much to comment on that. But I think the big news is that the fossil fuels is what really changed the game here. Okay, ready to move on? Yes, I'll take
Yep.
that as a yes.
Yes.
Great. Okay. So let's take a look at the En-ROADS dashboard, if you will. So this is what we're going to be working with. There's a lot of information here. This is a really cutting edge simulation model where you can test different climate solutions and generate scenarios for the future and see what their impact is. So I want to break this down for you. Right now, we're on track for the temperature to rise 3.6 degrees centigrade, about 6.5 degrees Fahrenheit, by the year 2100. When that happens, bad things happen. The Arctic sea ice would be gone 2 out of every 3 summers. Half of all insects would lose over half of their habitat. Drought would be 11 months longer. I'm not sure what that means because, whether that's per year, but a lot more droughts and a lot more burn. So you'll be able to see when we do scenarios how all of these things are affected. So if we don't want it to be 3 degrees, what do we want it to be?
You, Steve, can you just quickly say, so the commitments made during the Paris Accords are what put us on track to be at 3.6 Fahrenheit, or this is, and you know, everybody's made commitments, but nobody believes the commitments are going to be kept. Is this a prediction that's based on assumptions about commitments that exist but won't be capped? What is, where do they get that number?
I believe this comes from a predictions about industrial growth, you know, energy demands. You can see, we'll see in a moment. In fact, let me just fast forward to this a little bit.
I guess what I'm wondering is countries that have committed to doing certain things, is that's not baked into the 3.6, it sounds like.
No,
That's correct. Yes, it's only things that are actually happening right now.
I see.
So-
So
That's
The
nothing to
agreement
do
is
with-
not-
commitments without current action don't count, but
Correct.
okay.
right.
Yeah.
Right. And that's a good thing because we need to do a lot better than this. And the commitments, if fulfilled, would lower some of this, but not all. So let's take a look at this dashboard a little more carefully. Again, our goal in this exercise is to figure out a climate scenario that would keep global average temperature increase to 1.5 to 2 degrees Celsius instead of 3.6. Sounds like a small number, but it's actually a big deal. And you can see the baseline scenario has it going up to 3.6 degrees. We're already, oops. Oh, here we are. We're already, compared to pre-industrial times, we're already, actually here we're at 2020, over 1 degree centigrade increase. We want to keep it to 1.5 to 2 degrees. So let's look at this dashboard a little more carefully, and then we're going to get you creating scenarios that you prefer to solve the climate challenge. And we've done the simulation with over 190,000 people in 104 countries, so it's pretty well tested. Now there's 190,006 people who have done it. So let's break this down. We start with the upper left. This is where the energy is currently coming from. And what do you notice about what happens between 2000 and 2100 based on this graph on the upper left? What's going on? Anybody?
Energy more than
Um,
triples.
Yeah.
Yeah, energy usage goes way up. That's right, more than triples to exajoules per year. And where does the increase come? What
Renewables.
fuels?
Everything.
Coal, oil,
Yeah,
gas.
all of them. All of the above.
Everything.
Renewables grow the most because they have the smallest base, right? So everyone knows renewables is growing. But importantly, coal, oil, and gas are also growing because energy demand is growing. And the current system is basically supporting their growth. Let's take a look on the right. This is the impact of that energy coming where it does and being used as it is. And you can see this is the gigatons of CO2 equivalents. And here we see the 3.6 degrees centigrade that it has. And you'll see the baseline is this black line. And then the current scenario, well, we haven't created an alternative yet. So the current scenario is the baseline. So when you create a different scenario, we'll see a gap between these two. And hopefully we will see a big gap. And then we have our levers. So these are the variables we're inviting you to play with. There are 18 of them, and they cover all the major areas where we can do things to change through policy, through practices, through laws, through collaborations to change the energy scenario. Let's take a closer look at that. So here we have at the top, you have the impacts of our actions and you have the possible solutions listed. And this bottom area are possible solutions. I want to double click on that. And this is actually available to you as a PDF handout if you'd care to click on well, you can't click on this. Oh, there is no chat. Darn. Normally I would post this in the chat and you would click on it, but you can't do that. So when you get the slides, you can. I might be able, I can't do it now. I could make a QR code you could click on, but trust me, these 3 pages are available to you in a PDF handout. You don't really need them now, but I just want to walk you through this. So we have these 18 levers in the middle, and then there's a description of what each of them mean, right? So for instance, for coal, one lever says we can either discourage or encourage mining coal and the burning it in power plants. And so it goes for every other area. And you see these areas cover, they cover first energy supply, the different kinds of energy we have and the effects on that energy supply, transportation for energy efficiency and electrifying transportation, buildings and industry, how efficient they are and what kind of fuel they use. Then there's a section, because it is important, on things that we don't intervene on, but they affect us. Like if the population grows a lot or a little, and if the economy grows or a lot or a little, it makes a difference. So we can play with those variables. We have land and industry emissions through deforestation and methane. And then we have emerging technologies around carbon removal that aren't even scalable now. They're just in the testing phases, but they can make a big difference. So we put them in here. So these are the variables you're going to play with. Now, it's important to notice that not all choices or scenarios have the same impact. So some of these.
Steve, before you do that, could you go back?
Yeah.
So the sliders are interesting because the sliders are not quantitative, they're qualitative, and that's fine for this kind, for a general audience. If you slide the coal slider all the way to the left, does that mean 0 coal or does that mean some coal?
It means that we are creating policies and practices that make coal much more expensive.
Okay.
So it might be a tax.
Okay.
And that would lead to less coal. But you'll have a chance to see that in detail in a moment. And actually, even though these are qualitative, under the hood, there are quantities. We spell out exactly how expensive would it be, what the quantities are, but we're trying to keep it as simple as possible at this first layer of the dashboard.
The other thing would be, okay, I might say, well, okay, I'm going to slide coal, oil, and natural gas far to the left. Well, that's not going to meet the energy needs of the world. So I'm going to have to, these are coupled. I'm going to have to push renewables and nuclear or something far to the right in order to compensate. That relies on us knowing to do that though, right? It's not happening by itself.
Well, Scott, you're just an advanced student. You're jumping ahead a little bit because you're saying, well, what if we did this? And what if we did that? And how, so hold on to that thought. And we'll get there very quickly and we'll actually model what you just said. Okay?
Fine.
All right. So, but I just want to give you the full picture so you have you have a full hand to play with. These are the variables. Every variable has certain benefits or co-benefits. So we list these here. So for instance, if we reduce coal, I'll just take that example, that's also going to reduce air and water pollution, apart from greenhouse gases. It'll improve community health and the health of the ecosystem. And every one of these levers has other knock-on effects that are benefits. So when you're developing policies, you want to keep that in mind. But there's also what you could considerations or downsides to these, particularly around equity. So, a lot of the talk now about social justice says that, environmental justice requires social justice, that marginalized people and people who are more of the have-nots instead of the haves are going to bear the brunt of climate change and of climate fixes. So these are the equity considerations. So for instance, let's take coal. If we tax coal, it's going to raise energy costs. And people who have low income, who rely on coal jobs, are going to suffer the most. And so it is with every other lever. So what I like about this model is that it's simple enough to be able to play with, but it has enough nuance and complexity to realize that when you do something, it affects everything else. And that makes it a more credible model. Any questions about these two things, the benefits slide and the equity considerations? And these 3 pages, the dashboard, see it says page 1 on the right, the benefits and the equity considerations, those are in the PDF handout, which I'll be sure to get to you. I can email it to you, Scott. You can post it. You can't post it, but I'll get it to you guys somehow.
Well, we will put it together with the minutes of the meeting, so.
There you go. Very good. Okay.
I have a question. I guess going back to the first point about the dashboard, that the energy consumption was increasing by 3x.
Yeah.
What assumptions are underlying that? I mean, is that from population growth or what?
That's a good question. Can you just hold it a moment and I'll show you the right, because we'll have a chance to look under the hood and see. Is
And
that right?
the Chiagraph will be a good one to show on that one.
Yeah.
That's the
Okay.
excellent chart or graphs.
Yeah, there's so much under the hood, but it'll overwhelm you, and we'll get overwhelmed. We try to address it now. So give me in 2 minutes. We're going to be there.
Yep.
So the big picture is when we're designing scenarios for a better climate future, we want to ask 3 things. 1, how fast and effective will any of these changes be in lowering greenhouse gases and temperature? That's sort of the bottom line. But also, what are the benefits and what are the equity considerations? So we're doing it wisely for the good of society. So that's our gold standard here. Now, finally, we're ready to go. Let's go and do this. And I want to invite you. Well, again, you can't click on this and I can't post this in the chat. But if you care to play with this alongside, we want you to keep the screen share. But if you have the real estate on your screen where you can open up a browser, and all you have to do is go to, we can simplify this, go to climateinteractive.org. In fact, I'm going to show this to you. Let me get out of this.
You just Google search for En-ROADS climate. That's how I got
Yeah,
that.
actually, if you just go to climateinteractive.org, then you'll see, oh, are you still seeing my screen? Yes. You'll see this box here, explore our climate solution simulator. You click on that. And then you click on this again. And then it says, welcome. Here it is. And you say close. And now you are live on your browser with the climate simulator that we're going to use today. And after this meeting, you can go to this website and you can play to your heart's content with this. You can model all kinds of scenarios, but we're going to do some of these together and learn together the dynamics of climate change, because it's a little confusing to just jump in. Okay, everyone good with that? Now, let's see, I can't see you guys, so let me make sure.
Can I ask one other question about the dashboard here?
Sure.
So the temperature increase, is that basically a direct function of the plot, the gigatons of CO2 equivalent per year?
Yes.
Yes.
The
mean, in other
words,
greenhouse
like
gas
the-
net emissions. Yes.
There's a lot of variables that go into that. So for instance, if when the ocean gets warmer, that's when greenhouse gases increase, the ocean gets warmer. When it gets warmer, it then it sort of has a cyclical effect. So there's a lot of things that go into it, but basically, yes, it's the amount of greenhouse gas. And I think, Laura, we can see that
Yeah,
I mean,
I want-
I guess I was just kind of wondering, like, for that plot, why isn't the y-axis just temperature increase?
you can make
instead
it, you can look at that.
We
Go
can do
ahead and
that.
show him, Steve, the temperature. On the graph. Well, go under the
This
there.
one,
Just go over a little bit. Yeah, there.
there we go. Okay, so let's
And go
look at-
under impacts.
There we go.
Mhm.
And let's look at
Temp-
temperature.
There you go.
So there it is.
You-
This is
there's-
an effectiveness.
Yeah, there's dozens of graphs that you can look at, and that's one. And they had the 1.5 and the 2
So in
degrees.
fact, look at impacts. You can see what the difference is in sea level rise, for instance. Under the current scenario. That's what happens. And where the flood risks are. This draws from another model from Climate Central. Let's see if it loads. This is going to show you worldwide what's going to be flooded based on the amount of energy that's used. And it goes on and on.
Cool.
All right, you can look at the air pollution level. There's so many things that move with this. And every time we create a scenario that changes the greenhouse gases, you could look at the effect on air pollution on 2.5 emissions. You can look at the effect of everything. Everything interacts with everything else. You can look at the decrease in crop yields. So it's a very robust model. How about if we get you guys engaged in generating a scenario?
And
because-
can I show them
Sure.
one other
Go ahead,
thing?
Laura.
If we go back to our greenhouse gas emissions, go back to that graph that we originally had. Yeah, go there, and then it's that one, yeah.
Total or
Oh,
net?
no, the first one.
Net.
Net, there we go. And then if you look at the kebab, the 3 dots on that gray line where it says greenhouse gas net emissions, click that. And then go show UN pledges, the nationally determined contributions that you were asking about,
Oh,
Scott.
that's
Oh,
good.
See that red dot?
Yeah.
That if that's kind of that's what we've all agreed upon. And so we need to show some solutions that get that blue line under that, and that would
Oh.
kind of gauge you.
Oh, that's cool. Okay, yeah. So this allows you then to sort of back into what level of commitments are necessary to equal that global goal that has been
Right.
set.
Or are they adequate? I mean, we can start to test that out too. Is it
Yeah.
really going to do the job?
How do we know what they are? How do we know what those commitments are?
We don't. I mean, they're different on the.
I mean,
I
they're-
personally don't. But we won't
they're-
model that
they're in
per
here.
se.
There's somewhere in here, there's 400 pages of documentation, which is updated as needed.
Right.
And somewhere in here, I can't point to it, is what the commitments are and why that dot is exactly where it is.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's get you guys hands-on with this. I think it'll make all the difference.
And can I
Sure.
can I show them one more thing to answer Ronnie's question? Just one other, go under view. At the top, right there, and go under Kaya graphs. And this is your, Ronnie, I think what you were getting to is what's increasing the energy use. And it's population, GDP, the more goods and services we make at, our current processes are going to add more CO2. Energy intensity is more like what type of fuel we're using, and energy intensity of final energy is more like efficiency. And then that's going to give you the emissions from energy. So those are kind of your big players there. It doesn't include the methane. It doesn't include this, but this is 75% of our greenhouse gas emissions is from our energy sources.
And what's interesting here is the population growth and the growth in GDP, the economic growth what's driving the emissions up. The energy intensity actually, as that decreases, that's a good thing. And then the final energy intensity is good, but it's not enough to offset. I mean, you're growing. More people demand more energy. So as a result, more CO2 emissions.
And I'm sorry, I misspoke. I said it backwards. Your energy intensity is like your efficiency. Are you more efficient? And your energy intensity of final energy is, are you using more renewables? Are you using those sorts of things? So that's essentially what that is.
Yeah. Okay. Let's go back to the default graphs. And by the way, you can do all this on your own to your heart's content later. I wonder who's got a proposed scenario, and we're just going to play with a couple things at a time. What's one thing that you would change that would help create a more livable planet? Something you perhaps like, or that you think would be
Cut coal in half.
cut coal in half. All right, well, let's just take a look at coal, and let's move this slider, let's say here, where it's very highly taxed. All right. And you're going to be able to see the impact of this. Now, up here, this little replay last change, we're going to see the impact of taxing coal if we do nothing else. Watch what happens on the left when I click this. It's going to go up and down. It's going to do it 3 times just to show you the difference. So what do you see happening, Rebecca? When you
Well, we're
highly
producing less energy by 2100. We're producing less energy. Nothing has kind of replaced what we've taken away for the coal, and it's slightly improved our temperature increase, but
Yeah.
certainly not enough.
Right. So that's given us 0.2 degrees centigrade. And even though you'll notice that coal goes down, but some of the others do go up. The reduction in coal is somewhat offset by the increase in others, which you would expect. There's substitutability. Let's look at it again. So coal goes down quite a bit, and the total does go down somewhat because it's more expensive. So people figure out ways to be more economical. They don't want to spend the money.
Well, no, but Steve, I mean, if you push coal all the way, as I said, if you push coal all the way to the left, oil all the way to the left, natural gas all the way to the left, the total energy use by 2100 is going to drop hugely, but that's not realistic. I think it's realistic to think people are going to want to have the standard of living go up, and the population is going to grow. And so don't we have to make up for that difference?
Right. Well, you'll notice what happens. Let's say we take, let's restore to where we were. This is the
You're right. It didn't change all that much.
That's right. Now let's understand why. You can tax coal a lot, you can tax oil a lot, you can tax natural gas, which, by the way, are some of the most politically unpopular things to do. But notice that once you've taxed one, it doesn't necessarily accumulate because people want their energy and they want their fossil fuels. There are many other things that we need to do in addition.
Sure. Okay, I see what you're saying. So
Yeah.
the system does include the fact that people will continue using them even though they're highly taxed, right? They're going to pay more. What does it mean to slide the sliders all the way to the left, or are you already maximally to the left?
Well, you could go more to the left, but let's take a look here.
What is that?
Let's look at coal, because and this is good for you to know if you're going to play with this. These 3 dots,
Yeah.
they go under the hood for each of these. So if you look at coal, right now the status quo is here. When we say very highly taxed, we're talking about, let's say, $50 per ton. I don't know what TCE is really.
Ton
You know
of
what-
coal.
What is it?
Dollars per ton of coal.
Okay. And there are other things you could do. You could do it. And you can say when you're going to start and when you're going to stop. So this assumes starting next year and stopping in the year 2100.
Mm-hmm.
You could also factor in, well, what if we reduce coal use in other ways? What if we arbitrarily did? Suppose we reduce coal
I
use
see.
20%.
Mm-hmm.
Look at what happens to the energy demand, if we reduce it 20%. And when do we start that? And when do we stop that?
Mhm.
What if we stop building coal infrastructure? Whoa.
Wow.
Yeah. You stop building coal infrastructure beginning in 2025. Of course, coal plants will be retired. We won't be
Yeah.
using coal.
Yeah,
So, and then you can retire your plants in a more accelerated basis. Let's go back. Let's replace some of these here. So what we have here, let's see, why do we have, okay, so we have, what do we have here? Stop here, number rejection, we don't have that.
Just go out and see if your three dots are, you're back to normal.
Let's see. Oh, here, I have to exit out here. Yeah. Okay, so now we're back to the baseline.
Hmm.
If we very highly tax coal, you see a small decrease. You go to the three dots, it shows that we're highly taxed. We're now at $49.50. We haven't done the rest. There are other things we can do.
okay.
And we can
okay.
play with that.
And then Steve, we have a very sophisticated group here. So I think go ahead and show them that little, every one of these levers, see that little eye that's on that gray bar to the right, right
Right
there.
here, yeah.
That's the whole enchilada. That's going to give you a lot of information about, what they're doing here. They're going to talk about key dynamics. They're going to talk about potential co-benefits,
Mhm.
your equity. There's a video, like a little 15-minute video on just that lever to
Hmm.
go deeper. They'll give you references that you can see where your sources are and things like that. So
Wow.
each one of those has just incredible amounts of information. Model structure, that it'll link you into their website where it's going to discuss it lots more. So these are all links there to describe the phenomena that's going on under the hood.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
this is part of that documentation. And it really is extensive. Here's your quantification for the qualitative levers that show you exactly what it means. There's also a description here that when, for instance, squeezing the balloon is a phenomenon. When coal is taxed, natural gas goes up because now people are turning to a different fuel, so that it partly replaces it. So the system dynamics are here.
Yeah,
Okay,
that's great. Thank you. Yeah,
right,
lots of
and
other
that's-
levers, lots of
that's
other
just-
levers than the slider bar, and it's more.
yeah. So let's stay at the highest level. Let's say we're taxing coal. What else can we do to try to lower greenhouse gases? Let's make use of the whole dashboard here. Who else has an idea?
I guess I'm still a little bit stuck on the tripling of the energy. And I mean, it seems like the way to go about that is have, less increase per person. I think it was driven by the GDP, if I understood.
Yeah, it's actually population. The
But
number
you
of
said
people-
it, Ronnie, you said exactly. You have a key there. You said using less. I mean, that's one way. How else would you use less?
Or just use it. I mean, if we use, like, if I understand, like that graph there is saying that,
Mhm.
we're increasing the amount of energy. I mean, it's GDP per capita is increasing by 6x. And I guess I'm not sure exactly if that's saying that the energy used per person increases by 6x, but that's a lot. I mean, it doesn't seem like that has to be the case.
No, where are you?
Under
The
the
GDP
GDP.
per capita.
Okay,
No,
so
this
there's
is
four.
not the amount of energy. This is the economic wealth.
Yeah, but then it's tied to the energy in the model, right? In some way,
Yes.
maybe not one to
In
one.
some ways, but that depends on what we do. So for instance, see, this is where we use the mouse. Let's say we do something. I'm going to go back to the regular graphs. I want to take us away from the
Okay.
energy supply. Well, let's say somebody says, you know what? we need to make our buildings more efficient. Because even if we have population growing, there's no reason why we should be wasting all this. So we could take buildings and we can make them much more efficient. Look at the impact of this. We highly increase that. Now we have coal being taxed. We've added to it energy efficiency.
And let's electrify the houses
Yeah,
too.
yeah.
All
Can we
right.
just reduce the amount of energy that each person is using to be constant instead of increasing by a lot?
And
Well,
that's what you're doing. You hit it on the head right there, Ronnie.
Yeah,
Because you said it.
the
using
way
less.
the way that we reduce it is through policy, not by fiat. So we can't say, okay, everybody use less energy. But what we can do is we can tax energy so people are incented to use less energy. Or we could, let's say, electrify the buildings.
But why does energy efficiency have to be highly increased? I mean, if the population here is not increasing by that much, and you know, we could reduce the population growth. So I guess I mean, even without improving energy efficiency of buildings and industry, we should be able to have a steady amount of energy used per person rather than having it increase with the
But
economy.
Ronnie, I think that's not true. I think as people, and this is largely other countries, come out of poverty, then the real marker of that is they use more energy. And
Mhm.
so I think this model is saying if the natural order of things is people gaining more
Development, yeah.
development, thank you for the word, and that along with that comes energy. And this is if that energy just follows its natural course without an intervention, which would be toggling this to make that efficient energy, or a tax to mean you're not actually going to follow that course, you're going to use less energy. But if you follow the natural course of things, as countries develop, again, this doesn't apply too much to this country, they use more and more and more energy.
Yeah,
This
more
co- and
fridges,
then
more air
you have to-
conditioners.
And you,
Yeah.
yes, and more, and then you have to add on top of that, then electrification is partially like in the natural course of things, so they use more and more and more, more.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah.
That's
Is
it.
there a knob that I looked around in there and that's a very good point, Jason, but is there a knob that allows us to say, okay, what if the economy stagnates and that?
Yes.
Yeah, economic
Economic
growth.
growth.
Yeah,
So
but
it
only
assumes a
gets,
certain
it,
amount
even
of
if you
economic
slide
growth.
it all the way, it's still at like 0.5% per year, which actually is a lot when you compound it out.
Well, if we lower economic, if we say if we say that there's low growth, that would certainly have an impact. Let's see.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah, I guess
among
I
things
think
we
the
have.
energy efficiency knob on the buildings and industry is what really changed it. Because when I was playing around with it, I didn't see that big an impact as you're saying.
Uh,
Well,
So
I think that's
energy-
one of the big things here is that any one of these things or two of these things or three of these things doesn't make a big impact. And that we have to do everything other
lot.
than, the carbon price and that sort of thing. But nothing, no one thing or two things or three things is even near enough.
So in our training, the way we put that is there's no one silver bullet, but there's silver buckshot. It requires a lot of different solutions working together. And most people who specialize, who have it, I want this, or, let's build nuclear plants, or let's make energy more efficient. They're often looking at a silo, at a narrow group of solutions instead of the broader range. So what would you add to the mix? Jason, if you were to add more to the mix, what else could we add to this? I want to
Carbon
build a
price.
scenario here. What?
Carbon price.
Okay, so carbon price is sort of like taxing. Let's undo taxing for a moment, because when you put a price on carbon, it affects all carbon. And let's put it up to a high level. So let's see what the impact of that has been. So one of the nice things about a carbon price is that it can kick in right away. Whereas other things sometimes, like for instance, retiring coal plants, that takes time. You can't just shut down all coal plants. They have to retire over time. So you can see there's a big impact in early years here. Still, there's a growth in energy. You're not going to stop that. And this is what it does for greenhouse gas emissions. Let's make the carbon price a little higher, the medium level. Wait a minute. Oh, here we go. Very high. I went in the wrong direction. So carbon price has a big impact. And what happens to the mix of energies when you do a carbon price?
Renewables become.
Renewables go up because renewables are by definition clean energy. So they're not taxed at all. They don't contribute carbon. And
But where does it show the equity effects though, you know?
well, that's not here. That'll be, if we look here under carbon price and we go to the I, this will talk about what happens and give examples of what carbon pricing should look like countries and regions implementing carbon taxes, grassroots campaigns, clean electricity standards. There's many ways to make carbon more expensive. It's a high leverage strategy. It only affects part of the electricity system. And here you'll see coal goes down the most because it's the most carbon intensive. So with the carbon tax, the more greenhouse gas the fuel contributes, the more it's taxed. So coal is particularly disadvantaged. And then down here, you get to the equity considerations, the benefits and the considerations, which by the way, are the same as in that graph that I showed you. The handout that I promised you, these are copied from that handout. It's just all available in one place.
Rebecca, what they do in Canada is, they're giving checks back to citizens, so that's one way to address equity. So this model will hopefully start that discussion. And that's why I think they say you have to consider equity, because if policymakers are using this tool, we have to ask those very questions. And that's why they get it there, because you can't just put a policy in and not think about that. They have graphs in here to show how much money you would accrue from such a tax. And, theoretically, that money could be given back in some way.
So the idea of I think Citizens Climate Lobby talks about a carbon fee and dividend. So you tax the carbon and then you give it back in equal shares to households so that people have an incentive to use that money for other things rather than for carbon. Okay. Well, so far, folks, let me get rid of this. Let's put carbon price to kind of a high level, because no one is proposing making it super high right away. Usually people propose, let's start with $50 a ton, then 60, then 70 each year it increases. So we want to model that more realistically. So let's take a look. We talked about, somebody said, let's make buildings more efficient. What else can we do? What else do you think would have an impact?
So I was kind of cheating and looking in the background at the tool, and I basically found that the two sliders on the right have a large impact: the carbon removal technological and the methane and other gases.
Right. Okay. So with afforestation, what we're looking
that one's
at,
not as much as technological.
right. Okay. Well, yeah. So when people say technology will fix it, they may be right if the technology works. Now, however, these are not proven. Here we're looking at technology, carbon removal of about 50% of what's maximally possible. This also shows the different kinds of carbon capture and storage: direct air capture, bioenergy carbon capture, enhanced mineralization, and using carbon sequestration in agricultural practices. So you can play with all of these. None of these are currently scalable. So we can look for that. And so far, we're down to 2.6 degrees. We're still not at our target.
I think the methane is one that we haven't touched yet, and I think
Yeah, that one does a lot.
Ronnie alluded to that, but I think that's a big driver.
Okay, so let's moderately reduce methane,
No, let's aggressively reduce methane.
highly reduce.
Yeah,
I mean, one of the, and we'll look at that. We're now reducing it by over half. You can see if you want, you can, in this, you can go to detailed settings
hmm,
and you can actually play with the mix of how you reduce it,
Yeah.
whether it be from
Mhm.
energy and industry or from agriculture and waste. We'll go back to the regular one. And that has an impact. We're at 2.4. So what else do we need?
So can we bump the technological up to high growth?
I
Well,
think we need to stay
Well,
being most realistic, because we have
yeah,
to,
stay
we
with,
have to
stay with the things
politically
you know.
get these things accomplished as well as technologically, so
Yeah.
Oh, I see.
we have to be
As-
realistic.
Yeah. I had carbon price at very high in my window. That's why it was less. So yeah, if you slide the carbon price over, it gets down towards
But
2.
it's politically not feasible, so
Well,
I would
it's interesting.
electrify, I would encourage electrification of buildings
Alright.
and transport.
Rebecca, I just want to comment. I think it's interesting you bring up being realistic. I think the only thing on here that's realistic that will slide all the way over is technological. You know, I think the only thing that people will support that's extreme is tech, because you know,
well, so, I mean,
But it's not
basically-
effective. We
I
can't assume
agree.
that it's effective
but it's I think it's
or
it's
affordable.
more possible that in 50 years that tech is going to be all the way to the right than we're allowed to tell people not to eat hamburgers. You know what I mean?
Well, it is,
That's
and it
much
is
more
very,
realistic.
it is very effective. I mean, I guess the thing is, it's not,
Well, it's effective if you imagine pulling
Unlimited.
gigatons of carbon out of the atmosphere, which is, that's like thousands of petrochemical plant scale. So, it's easy unless you actually think about the magnitude of the hardware required to do that. It does seem easy, but it's
And
really
the
not.
unlimited
It's not easy.
budget. Nobody has an unlimited budget.
And
So
the
I just
issue,
wanna-
yeah,
I just
yeah,
wanna
the other
point out-
issue that Steve's coming out about the carbon removal is currently, there aren't any, there's a lot of carrots out there, but not very many sticks, in terms of policy. So why would a company spend a ton of money to, remove the carbon? Why would they do that unless there's some policies or something like that to really encourage it? So, things like efficiency, if plants are more efficient, they're going to spend less money, and there's actually an economic benefit there. You can see those incentives. So as I think more about carbon removal and technology, we really got to get that reason why people would do it and spend a lot of money and get the technology, spend the money in research.
Well,
to
the only way people would,
rapidly-
the only way people would do it is because because government is spending that money, and
We
basically,
need a stick, right?
yeah, you could increase the price of carbon and pay people to suck it out of the atmosphere at the same level that you tax them. You could do
Yeah.
something like that, and
Something like
then
that.
it's really, it's public money being used in massive quantities, trillions of dollars to do that, basically.
So I
There's
just want to
no-
point out, this is exactly the kind of discussion we hope to stimulate through a workshop on this. People grappling with the trade-offs, what's possible, what's likely, what's popular, what's necessary, getting people more engaged in thinking about the complexities of the solutions as they attempt to get this over on the right down to 2 degrees centigrade, 1.5, 2 degrees, which we still haven't done, by the way. So let's see, what else can we do? What are some things that are within our easy grasp?
maybe to increase the
Afforestation.
carbon price more.
Afforestation, add
yeah,
more
no.
trees.
Okay, we could plant more trees, medium growth.
It's amazing though that you can plant a ton of trees and it doesn't have that large of an effect.
Yeah.
And why is that, do you think?
Because the carbon sequestering capacity of that many trees is nothing is not, you know, comparable to what we're pumping into the atmosphere and will pump into the atmosphere, I guess. I mean, it's
And it's slow to grow, right?
It's slow to grow. It
and-
takes time.
Another
Takes-
thing to keep in mind is that afforestation is often done in places where it's not effective. Like if you just plant a tree in the middle of the desert, that doesn't count, you know? And so lots of afforestation initiatives are completely ineffective that way.
It also says here, large scale afforestation can compromise biodiversity because people plant, you know, tons of trees, monoculture of trees, and it can actually ruin habitat. So again, there's a lot of, there's benefits and there's equity considerations for all these.
And if you guys read my piece in October, you may remember albedo, the reflectivity. So a forest reflects much less light than bare dirt reflects. So it actually absorbs more heat from the sun.
Mhm.
Good point. Anything else we can do? There's an obvious one here. No one's touched.
Population.
Yeah, now population, if you're gonna make that an intervention,
How do you control, how do you do that though? I mean, both population and people's aspiration to have a better life, which is embodied in economic growth. How do you do that?
well,
You-
let's
Edu-
take,
well, you
Educate
control-
women.
Population
You
is
affect population with
projected to start
education.
falling.
A population is, you know, number of kids is inversely proportional to how educated the mother is.
Yeah, yeah.
Right, so
okay.
you spend billions of dollars educating all the little girls in the world, population growth goes way, way down.
Yeah.
so women's
okay, good
education,
point.
access to family planning can slow population growth in a non-coercive way. That's true. And it has some limited, those things have limited impact. So, you know, if we didn't do anything, we'd have 10.4 billion. Things are predicted to grow. If they grow at a slow rate, low growth, there'd be 9.6 billion, small decrease. Okay, what else?
Well, the energy efficiency for transportation hasn't changed, which I think it should, right? That's another one that can be
All right, let's
incentivized.
increase that.
Yeah.
Let's look at
And
the
that,
impact.
that could be public transportation, that could be creating walkable.
I mean, it helps.
communities.
It's not a big effect, but there's no reason not to do it. I think, you know,
Right.
for all those where a moderate thing can be done, we ought to put them up to a moderate level. And then there are still some big drivers that
Okay, we're at 2.2.
can you put energy efficiency of transportation back up?
Sure.
please? There, or yeah, highly increased. I mean, over time, highly increased. That's good. Thanks.
Increase renewables.
Okay. Let's increase renewables through subsidies.
Had no
What's
effect.
interesting here is, why doesn't this have an effect?
Because renewables are now price competitive. I mean, well,
Right, because carbon price has already done this.
oh, I see. Yeah.
Watch what happens. If we take away the carbon price and we increase renewables, well, it still has very little effect. You can see it a little bit. You see that green thing going, but with a carbon price, watch what happens. So the carbon price really accelerates the growth of renewables. Because fossil fuels are more expensive.
And it knocks off carbon a lot. I mean, coal.
Coal.
The others that have some impact are the electrification of buildings and industry and transport.
Yeah. So we got
And
one
nuclear?
more 0.1 degree. What?
What about nuclear?
You
We
can turn those
increased
up. You can turn up the electrification of transport and buildings and industry.
Well, we could turn up anything, but these are sort of calibrated so that when people suggest it, we kind of take it one click because that's sort of a reasonable, doable amount. But you could do any of these more extreme. You could play with that. Let's go to nuclear and see what happens when we subsidize nuclear.
Nothing.
Watch the
Well-
renewables.
Yeah, there is some difference there. And you'll see it's this thin blue line that is increasing when you subsidize nuclear, or when you do second generation nuclear, maybe even highly subsidized, but it's not huge and it's not immediate.
Yeah, it's not
If
worthwhile.
you look here, you can see it takes a good, another 10 years or so to kick in. And again, you can play with the amount of the subsidy and when it starts and when it stops, and you can even put in R&D breakthroughs and how much the cost will be reduced. Okay,
I mean, so you need to do one of the ones that we've already done. You can increase the carbon price, you can increase the electrification or the technological. Those will
Reduce
all
the
break.
population.
That doesn't do very much, I don't think.
what about deforestation? No one's mentioned that.
That doesn't do very much either.
Well, it does put us over the line. We're down to 2.0.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think you can put up energy efficiency and transport efficiency higher. Electrification of buildings higher.
yeah. I mean,
That's
if you put,
like complete electrification of buildings is the realistic thing.
yeah, that's huge.
Yeah, that's a big one.
Well, you've basically done you've met the challenge collectively of keeping greenhouse gases to 2.0 by 2100. So congratulations on that. And what observations do you have about what it takes to get there?
Everything, practically.
It
Everything
takes-
has to be, almost every lever has to be touched.
It takes a lot
Well-
of different things to add up. What else?
Perhaps.
There were some that had high impact, I still think. I mean, if you just do the carbon price and the technological, that gets you there pretty much.
Mhm. Well, the technological is speculative. Hopefully it'll come true.
Everything's speculative, right?
Well, but I mean, some are proven and some aren't. So watch what happens if we don't have a carbon price. We're back up to 2.5. So what do you the carbon price is a bit of a stick, right? It's saying if you keep using fossil fuels, you're going to pay for it.
I just think it's interesting that there are some things that make very little difference and they might be politically difficult to implement and not worth it. So that should be
Yeah.
kept in mind. And you concentrate on the things that make a big difference. So I find that.
Like,
Right.
for example, the taxes on coal, oil, and natural gas, at least according to the model, don't do anything, really.
And they piss off.
Well, if you take out a carbon price, that's like taxing coal, oil, and
I see.
gas. So, carbon price is sort of a tax. It's just a different way of looking at it.
But why don't they do as much?
Yeah,
Or-
they don't, it doesn't change nearly as much. If you highly tax all the 3 fossil fuels, it still doesn't change that much. As much as the carbon tax does,
Let's
which is
see.
interesting.
But we don't know if they're equivalent,
Well-
potentially that tax on carbon price for the ton is, maybe it doesn't go far enough over type of thing.
Well, it must be.
I wonder if
much-
a carbon tax has a lot to do with taxing the company. And if the gas tax, for example, has a lot to do with taxing the end consumer. Of course, there's overlap, but I wonder if there's a different focus on each of those.
I think when we talk about taxes here, I believe that the coal, oil, and natural gas tax would be taxed based on the amount of energy taken out of the ground and deployed. So not at the consumer level. And so would a carbon price.
Well, I guess it just means that the carbon price slider is much, you know, it's scaling much faster in the numbers than what it does when you slide the coal, oil, or natural gas slider.
Yeah, and you ask a great question, and now I'm definitely going to ask Climate Interactive, you know, to look at that study. You know, what do the coal, oil, and natural gas need to be slid over to equal so much carbon price? I mean, it's a good
Yeah, how do you
study. We probably need that answer.
calibrate them? Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess the thing that's kind of hard to understand is number one, like how difficult it is to achieve the different things, and then also where it leaves us in terms of quality of life or some other metric.
Yeah, and those
I
can
mean, we
be,
reduced the energy, but so what did that do to, you know, the quality of life of the population? I'm not
Well,
sure.
let's look at some of the impacts. Yeah, good,
Yeah.
Steve. Let's look
so
at some
we
of
can
those.
actually see what the difference is in, let's
Look
say,
at
air pollution.
crop yields is a good one, because food scarcity due to climate change is becoming a hot topic now. We're going to see more and more of that. Look at that. Yeah, do that one. So that shows the black, of course, is our baseline. The blue is, and this is the decreased crop yields. And this is like, I don't know, 75–80% of our world caloric intake are from maize, wheat, rice, and soybeans. And so this is, you know, our food source, and how much, if we can reduce the temperature, you know,
Right.
that's,
I mean, these are like the benefits, right? But I guess I don't have a view of like what the costs were, like how many people were not brought out of poverty because we decreased the energy consumption with the carbon price or something like that.
yeah. And again, that's as we make those policies, that's exactly the discussions that need to happen. And, you know, do you pay the money back to them in terms of a dividend? You know, those are the final touches as we put these policies in place.
I think it's important to understand that some effects of all these things are harmful, right? But the overall net is positive for the planet and for everybody on it. But there's definitely, as Ronnie brings up, there's potentially harm in any policy that's passed, and it could be dire harm for some people. But we know that the harm is worse in general if we don't do those things.
Yeah. And there are some strategies that help to mitigate that harm. And you can see it, particularly in things like sea level rise. You can see, well, where, you know, how many people are being flooded? How many people lose their livelihood in their homes?
Can you
But
show them?
increasing energy efficiency for both cars and buildings is not necessarily going to be a harm for people. I mean, some people won't be able to afford to do that, but you know.
Well, yeah, that's what people are complaining about now. There's people say, listen, I can't afford this new water heater. If I do that, then I can't put in for my kids' college this month, you know? And that's
Yes and no,
not
though.
starving,
I
but
mean,
it's harmful.
yes and no. I mean, I was looking at a heat pump, and it's pretty much the
Should-
same price nowadays, you know, a heat pump
Is that
versus a gas heater. So, you know, if you're going to have to replace your machine because it's at its end of life, you know, the prices are similar. So as we increase energy efficiency, prices will go down for these items. Actually, look at how much a TV costs compared to 10
Yeah.
years ago, 20 years ago. So
But they're not there yet. An electric car is not anywhere close yet. I mean, I know you have an electric car, and some of them are similar, but the majority are not. Like my brother's a percussionist. He works in New York City. He doesn't have a dime. He cares about the environment. He does not have a dime extra to spend on the
well, he
environment.
doesn't need a
That's
car
the way that most
in
people live.
New York City.
Well, this is
Well,
this is
he
where
does need a car. He's a percussionist.
Well-
He has to bring timpani to, you know what I mean? But
Right.
the average person does not have extra money to spend on climate.
is
So
that in
this
here
is
somewhere? Like
where-
how much
this is
money
where-
people are spending on their energy? I mean, it must be
Yes, it
in the
is.
model, right?
It certainly is. If you go under financial, impact and yeah, go under financial. Cost of energy.
Let's see, total annual cost of energy.
I think a
So,
wonderful take home
Mm.
of this. Number
Mhm.
one is that what should our government be doing? Who should we be voting for, et cetera, et cetera? What policies should we support? And then the complete other end of the spectrum is what should we do on our own? I'm a big believer in personal action and that it influences action as a group, which influences what our lawmakers do, et cetera. Then you say, okay, well, let's take all these sliders here and let me apply that to myself. Okay, well, what are the two most effective ones that Ronnie pointed out? Carbon price. Well, I can't put a price on carbon, but the equivalent of that is not creating any carbon, which is huge. So that means not ordering from Amazon. It means using electrical everything. What's the other thing? Technological doesn't exist. And carbon offsets are not the thing. So as an individual, we have to do all of these other things if we want to
Well,
influence this.
yeah,
Well,
so
you
this
can
gets,
buy carbon credits.
But a carbon credit is not a carbon credit. A carbon credit is at least in 2022, for the most part, absolute baloney. A carbon credit is paying somebody to maybe plant a tree somewhere, kind of, or it's paying somebody to use renewable energy when they wouldn't have otherwise. A carbon credit does not remove carbon from the atmosphere other than very exceptional ones, which are basically paying for afforestation, which does not remove the carbon that you put there for many, many, many years.
And
So
this,
the-
you really
so-
start to struggle on this model when you take it to the personal level. And again, one of the ways that potentially I would use this model is you get people say, all you have to do is, eat a vegetarian diet, or all you have to do is plant trees. I mean, you've heard this probably. And I think this model kind of debunks some of that. And we'll say, and that kind of comes, you can come back and say, no, that's not all we're going to do to get to where we need to be. I
That's
think
exactly what
it's-
I'm saying. I'm saying
Yep.
this model is
Right.
perfect for a personal level
Okay.
because it tells people you need to do everything. You can't
Well-
just say I'm going to be a vegetarian. You can't just say I'm going to drive a
Right.
Tesla.
Right.
You need to do something in every category if you want to actually feel that you are making as much progress as you can make.
well, I'm gonna jump ahead and show you kind of some of the implications of this. I think you've gotten a sense of the depth of the model, the interactivity of it, how it doesn't have everything in it, but it has a lot in it. And then you're raising, Jason, the question of there's not just a matter of how many different kinds of interventions are needed, but how many of them need to happen at a system-wide level versus relying on the individual actions of virtuous people. And I think the point of view, En-ROADS is basically saying, what commitments do we need from nations? What policies, what laws are needed to incent people to do all of the above, to make it hard for them to continue with practices that add greenhouse gases and make it easy for them to have less impact. So let's, I want to go back to move this. Where am I here? Here we are. And when you get the slides, you'll see this is the link that you take to go there. So you've actually generated a lot of insights from this. I'm not going to go ahead and list them here, although you might want to do that, Scott, for your notes if you've been taking notes. Here are some of the typical ones. I kind of made this list in advance, and you've hit a lot of them. And one of them is kind of controversial in a way, because Jason, what you said is when people make personal choices, it does give them it sets the model, but those lifestyle choices alone are not sufficient for system-wide change.
But I've said this a million times, not to you guys, but politicians make choices based on what other people do. The choices that we make affect everybody around us, and there's those choices have a downstream effect and they have a chain reaction. If nobody cared, this is the example I've used before, if nobody cared about the rights for LGBTQ citizens, then there would be no law whatsoever protecting them. Then those laws come from people having personal relationships with people who are in a different community from them and teaching them. My partner at work doesn't care about the environment and has changed his household completely because he shares an office with me and because of the things we talk about. And then he's going to teach his kids and he's going to teach his wife, and my wife teaches the people she works with. And that's where everything comes from. If we all just sit down and say, I don't need to do this, the government's going to do this, the government will not do anything.
So I think you're speaking to, what does it take to build the political will for the government to do things? And that means a lot of people have to demand it, model it, and demand it. Right? The government won't do it just because a few people ask them to, and they think it's a good idea. Here are some of the discoveries that people often make when they go through this. That we have to go beyond personal lifestyle choices, although they are necessary and helpful. That every successful scenario here cuts the burning of coal, oil, and gas. It's really almost, I think it's impossible to get to 2.0 degrees unless coal, oil, and gas are reduced. You saw a price on carbon is probably the quickest and most effective way to change the whole system through that. And there are a lot of lower leverage actions that address climate change globally, but they're not as high as a priority as reducing fossil fuel use. Does that make sense to people?
There was also the 10 to 20 years in number 2, which, it's important that it's, has to start happening now, right?
That it starts now, right. So the question then is, now what do we do? Let me go back to the slideshow mode. And Paul Hawkins said something really interesting. It's estimated that between 98 and 99% of humanity is disengaged from climate change. And maybe your friends are engaged, but 98 and 99% of people are not. And from the Earth's point of view, there's no difference between a climate denier and someone who understands the problem but doesn't actually do anything. And I think that certainly in my bubble of acquaintances and friends, a lot of people are in agreement that we have a problem and we need to do something about it, but they're not yet engaged in activity, in activism. And it really is a part of me. I mean, I'm engaged. I'm doing this. I've made some personal lifestyle choices. I'm a volunteer for Citizens Climate Lobby. I'm doing this and that. Still, I could be more engaged. We could all be more committed to this. How do we do that? Well, I think there's a difference between what we're ready to do that's in our comfort zone, and most people are comfortable mostly with making their own personal choices. And where the magic happens, though, is when we work together to change the whole system. And to do that, we need people to become engaged advocates, to demand that the system change, that legislators pass new policies. So how do we do that? Sam Daly Harris is a community organizer and a very kind of in the world of activism, he's really well known for getting people engaged. And he kind of lays out this logic chain that I want to expose you to, and I want to get your reactions. He says, you really can make a profound difference on big issues with your voice as a citizen, but you probably haven't. Now think about most people, because of your sense of powerlessness and resignation about politics. If you find an organization that's committed to dissolving the powerlessness, you can make that profound difference. And that organization needs to build chapters, provide training, make asks of elected officials, and encourage people to be audacious. And when you're trained and encouraged as an advocate, you'll succeed at doing things you never thought you would do. And then you'll see yourself in a new light. People will shift their identity from the people who are watching it happen to being a community leader. And then you'll be amazed. So the assertion here is that we need to mobilize people, train them, and get them organized to become advocates if we want to change the system. What do you think about that? What are your thoughts and reactions?
I think it sounds nice. But the powerlessness thing rings true to me.
Mhm.
Well, ultimately it gets, I mean, you know, the law, passing laws gets down to, you know, the politics in the United States and the divisiveness of the politics and the fact that we're just at a razor's edge with, you know, Democrats, Republicans, and pretty bipolar views of what could and should be done with regard to climate. So yes, it matters that we are audacious and engage our legislators, but if we engage the legislators in the state of California, we're not going to get much done because they're already doing just about as much as they possibly can. So this is a fight that, you know, it's a problem of communities all across the United States and you know, education and yeah, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's a big long-term thing, and we're on a razor's edge right now in terms of having the political will to do anything about climate change. I mean, we're lucky that we were on the Democrat side of the razor edge for, you know, the number of years we were, and now with the House flipping to Republican, we're going to be in this divided state that's going to, you know, make any additional progress really challenging. So I'm not sure. I mean, you know, short of packing up and taking one's roadshow to Kansas, you know, it's challenging to figure out what else to do here, frankly.
So I'm so glad you're raising these because a couple of things are really important. If we see things in partisan terms, then it's Democrats versus Republicans, people who are for or against. We've kind of lost the war because this is something where we need everybody to embrace this as not a partisan issue, but as something that concerns all of us.
No.
We need to depoliticize it.
It's not a partisan issue, but the way it has been taken as such by the partisan politics in our country, and so to wrestle it back from that is where a lot of, you know, peer-to-peer understanding needs to be built and conversations with community. But, you know, in my local community here, so anyway, yes, yeah.
I'm with you. So now Laura and I are going to shift gears from being facilitators of a workshop from Climate Interactive on the model to talking about what it takes to mobilize people to move from what I call passive agreement to engaged activism and to overcome that resignation. Because frankly, in our work with Citizens Climate Lobby, and I've worked also with 350.org and with Climate Reality, I've worked with 3 major climate organizations, and most of them stop with education. And the issue now is not really giving people information, it's moving them to action. So, so just to be explicit, Laura and I have chosen to put our energy behind Citizens Climate Lobby because they are an organization that has made a tremendous difference so far over the last 10 years in taking a nonpartisan approach. And here's how they've done it. They engage in 5 core activities through a network of chapters throughout the US and internationally to bring citizens into the political process and create constructive change. And they have a network of chapters throughout the US, about over 200,000 supporters. And here are the 5 activities. Let's go through them. First, they lobby Congress, both.
And by
in-
the way, I just lobbied my very conservative Republican Congress today. So
How did it go?
actually really good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let me say that relationship is getting stronger. So.
Yeah.
we're
So
building a relationship.
Laura is a great advocate here, and Citizens Climate Lobby believes in treating everyone as a potential ally, not making anyone the enemy, not putting anyone on the other side. I actually went to Washington one year for our national conference. We do a lobby day where 1,000 volunteers go into every congressional office, not 1,000 in each office, but they spread out and they visit every congressional office in order to meet with the staff or with a member of Congress and basically show respect and appreciation for what they're doing that we can find that is positive, and then to ask for their support for a bipartisan approach. But in order to lobby Congress, you need a lot of influence on them. So we have teams that write letters to the editor and op-eds. We've published thousands of op-eds and letters to the editor across the country through organized efforts to influence the media. We also reach out at farmers markets, at workshops, at all kinds of festivals, and recruit people at the grassroots level to join the organization and get involved. And we work with community leaders, trying to get chambers of commerce, for instance, to endorse us and to endorse the approach of a price on carbon. And then we make sure that we build the chapters, that we kind of do the team building underneath. So for instance, in our area, we have, there's actually several chapters in the Bay Area. The one that covers Portola Valley is mostly Silicon Valley North. There's also Silicon Valley South. They have monthly meetings, they do campaigns. If we could get people from our community to get involved with systemic action, this would be a vehicle to do that. It's very hard to do it alone. It's great to find your organization and put your efforts behind it. So CCL, just to let you know, is going through a transition with the passage of the Inflation Reduction Act. We consider that a significant win. It wasn't everything we wanted, but it was the biggest climate bill so far. And we're continuing to work on carbon pricing and something called CBAM, which is making sure that goods that come into the country from overseas also have to pay a carbon tax if they aren't taxed in their own country. So there's an adjustment. And we're also taking on 3 other areas, and this is all going to be launched this weekend. We're just beginning to broaden the agenda to make sure that it's easier to get permits for clean energy, to electrify buildings, to make them efficient, and to have healthy forests, some of the levers that make the biggest difference.
You just went mute, Steve. Steve, you're muted.
Thank you. Yeah, I hit the wrong button. Okay, good. So if you want details behind
I'd be
these,
curious just to hear, so for the Silicon Valley North, Silicon Valley South chapters, so to the extent that the the focus is engaging, well, basically building community support, but then engaging as activists with the political process. What political process in Silicon Valley are you engaging, and what do you see that needs to be influenced from where it already is?
that's a good point, because we have very friendly members of Congress for the climate agenda. Anna Eshoo and others are very much in our corner. And so, but we still need to bring emphasis to the issue because they have a lot on their plate.
Okay.
And the more that we rattle their cages, the more they attempt to influence their colleagues.
Gotcha.
But there are other things that happen outside of the chapters. Let's see if I have this. You know what? I meant to do a screenshot on this and I didn't. There are a number of action teams that operate at the national level.
Okay, yeah,
And-
that I mean, I can see there's probably more opportunity for members of those organizations in the Bay Area to have impact at a national level. Than perhaps potentially, I mean, yes, it always is going to help to talk to Anna Eshoo and make sure this is high on our priority list, but there's so much need elsewhere to change people's understanding and so.
There is. And so we have action teams focused on just about every segment of society. So there are like a number of action teams focused on people of faith. So there'll be a Jewish action team and a Catholic action team, and they go through the churches and through the clergy.
Mhm.
There'll be agricultural rejuvenation action teams trying to promote better land use. Laura, help me out here. There's
Probably a group to
Fashion
help
design.
shut
There's
down coal
wild-
plants.
Yeah, wildlife, there's meteorologists, there's nuclear industry, there's the coal industries in there. Rotary, all the civics groups are in there as well. There's probably, I want to say maybe 30 different action groups. Whatever kind of is a big interest, I'm sure there's an action group to match. The wildlife one is a medical one with just medical profession is in there, very strong group.
Yeah. I think there's more than 30, but the point is that what we want to do is shift people's identity from being kind of at the effect of this, the victim of it's happening to us, to being engaged to do it. And my question for you, and particularly those of you on the sustainability committee, is do you have an interest and do you see it as a legitimate part of your purview to open the door for our community members to have an impact beyond their personal lifestyle choices and to become active in changing the system? Because if we could do that here and in every other community, we would have the kind of mass movement that Jason has talked about and that I think we need in order to really change the system. What do you think about that?
I think the answer is yes, but I think the charter for our committee may not include that. But I think some of us as individuals might want to join forces with your organization. We might as individuals talk up the organization with friends and family. I don't know if there's a role for us as a town committee though to get involved in the way you're describing. I'd open that up for others on the committee. I'm not sure how that fits with the specific
Well-
charter that we have as a town committee, which is, it is what it
We
is,
can-
but it's
yeah.
not.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the main point that we can effect is building electrification and efficiency. Because we can encourage town council to implement stricter reach codes. So that the town can implement that, can be sort of forced to implement that.
Yeah. We can also educate, we can have, for information forums, we could have, seminar on, carbon tax, we can do all sorts of things that are more informational in nature that support the direction that your organization is going in. But in terms of us helping coalesce Portola Valley citizens to, become advocates through, something like what you're describing, I'm not sure it's consistent with our charter.
Well, we can encourage people to participate, to take on a project and write letters or whatever, but it's just something, it's an education component, less of a.
I kind of agree with what I thought, Scott. To me, it doesn't necessarily seem like a fit for the committee. I mean, for the committee activities. I mean, we can personally, individually encourage people to become activists, but I don't.
I like your idea of perhaps, let me just put out a scenario of hosting a climate change awareness day. And you could talk about, you could look at things that could be done at the local town level in terms of our practices, what the town does, what individuals do. But you could also invite some of the national climate groups to come and have a table or give a talk and talk about what they're doing and open the door for the citizens of Portola Valley to participate where they wish. And because maybe the committee is not just focused on what happens in Portola Valley, but is also the steward of educating the people of Portola Valley about what's needed to create a healthy climate.
I think if, you know, if it were in the context of an information day and it was not just one organization that we invited, but it was several different ones, and you know, each organization was able to talk about their mission, what they do, and then Portola Valley citizens, based on that, decided, hey, I really want to join Citizens Climate Lobby because it sounds like what they're doing is really good work. And I think that's probably an okay means for us to, you know, channel people in the direction of your group. I don't think we can take a position on a specific group being the one that PV citizens ought to get involved with, but if it were a broader, you know, informational event with a number of groups represented, then I think that probably is consistent with our charter.
Yeah, I think that'd be great. And there are really just a handful of organizations that have this kind of chapter model, because what you don't want to do is bring in a bunch of groups that say, give us money, give us money. I mean, that's fine. Everyone has their fundraising efforts. It's participate with us, engage with us. And that means they have to have local chapters so people can do things on the local level, even if it has national impact.
Yeah, yeah.
Well,
Let me, and I think it would be
Yeah.
useful to separate for our committee, and I don't think we need to talk about this tonight, but there's the tool itself, the simulation tool, and the potential for us to have, you know, a PV. I mean, this meeting was a open PV meeting, but we didn't really advertise it extensively because we really, frankly, we wanted to test out what you've got to offer, right? And now we can reflect on what it is and how the training or simulation goes, and whether we then as a committee would want to host some event where you might do a repetition of that for, you know, 20 or 30 people from Portola Valley potentially. So that's one possibility. That would need to be separate, I think, from the sort of the second half of this meeting, which was more, you know, you advocating for a specific organization and a specific approach, which is fine. And I thought that was a reasonable thing for our committee to hear, but I don't think we want to necessarily have that be something that gets represented to, you know, under the auspices of our committee, unless it's in a broader information sharing kind of event. But the simulation itself is really highly educational, and I guess we just need to think about whether it's how and whether we want to, you know, help proliferate that in Portola Valley, I guess.
Mhm. Yeah, I wonder if others want to chime in. Anita, I haven't heard from you much, and others on the committee.
Yeah, I was just considering that some of us have other groups besides the sustainability committee, which is part of the town. We have other groups that have a slightly different, just a different population interested in the same outcome. And there's nothing, and something that excites some of the groups is the opportunity to lobby the right people for the right things, and understanding what's important, understanding where the differences can be made. That I really enjoyed hearing that the tool can kind of lead you to those conclusions. It can, you can understand what makes a difference, what doesn't make a difference. And if you pair that with some initiatives that might be actually implemented by lobbying the right people, whether it's California lawmakers or national lawmakers, you know, whether it's
Right.
Anna Eshoo or Mark Berman, doing the act of first understanding and then doing the lobbying, you know, writing the petitions, showing up at
Right.
meetings, writing letters, whatever. That's something that's of great interest to a lot of groups. We get a lot of interest when we
Yeah.
put out a petition and explain, you know, what it is we're petitioning somebody to do. And so I see that as a possibility. And, you know, there might be folks who in those groups who might, you know, want to attend, might want to join a chapter of En-ROADS and learn more about it and do that kind of work.
So what I hear you saying, and this coalesces for me, is there's the first part of giving people the education about what all the components are that make up this climate change and the complexities of it and what makes a difference and what doesn't, so people know where to focus. And then the second part is answering the question, well, what can I do about it? And what can I do is to become involved in influencing the system through some organization. And it doesn't have to be Citizens Climate Lobby. I've worked with 350.org. They have a local chapter that's very involved in lobbying state legislature around very specific bills that make a difference. The Climate Reality Project is also, everyone's kind of realizing that we can't just educate. We need to influence local, state, regional, national decision makers. And there are a number of really good organizations that do that.
What organization were you talking about earlier where you said there's a Northern Silicon Valley chapter and a Southern?
That was Citizens Climate Lobby.
It was Citizens Climate Lobby. Okay.
Yeah, and they are, I think CCL is the most well-established, largest, well-organized, and very importantly, nonpartisan, treating Republicans and Democrats with equal respect. Because we see everybody as an ally, potential ally. But there are other organizations that also are quite inclusive and I think it'd be fine to offer you know, several examples of organizations and people could choose.
It would be great to have all the organizations in one place and a description of, you know, where their niche is, you know, what they do that's different than the other organizations. There are.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we're coming to the end of our time. We've got about 10 minutes, and I really appreciate all the participation we've gotten from all of you in the comments. Other thoughts about the utility, particularly of the model, the simulator, and deploying that. I mean, one of the things I plan to do is to offer presentations of this to community groups and to the public and through PV Forum, you know. PV Forum is always my go-to for anything we need, and say, hey, come and learn, come and play with climate scenarios. You know, it doesn't need to be sponsored by anyone. And there are about 500 of us climate ambassadors trained by Climate Interactive around the world who make these presentations. And because we want to spread the word and we want people to be more cognizant of what it will take to really help our planet. It's usually a lot more than what people think. And we need people to know that. Laura, anything you want to add or any perspective you want to give?
Yeah, this was number one, this was a very fantastic group. And I knew right away we were going to have to get pretty deep pretty quick. I mean, you had great questions, and I think that you'll play with it a little bit more when we get off this call, and you'll see a lot of insights. Also, I just want to comment that personally, I have used the tool with a variety of groups. I recently presented with one of the founders of the group to Accenture, to their executive branch. Investors are using this. You know, I've used it with members of Congress. Middle schoolers catch on to this amazingly, really wonderfully. So in my perfect world and vision, I wish we all could use this tool so that we all have the common foundation which to make decisions off of. So I really think, you know, really open up our minds on who we're introducing this tool is. I think I've been working on this probably just like you guys have for decades. And for me, this tool has been such a game changer. I feel so much more clear on what we need to do and so much, a lot of assurance of like, okay, yes, we're working on the right thing. So anyway, anybody you can think of, and I think getting the word out is important. And the thing that Steve is doing in terms of the engagement, and Citizens Climate Lobby is one, but I think all the ambassadors who've been giving this presentation for a long while feel a little bit like what Anita was saying. I want to give someone a list of places to go next, because I think that's the thing that people kind of leave with a workshop is, how do I get involved, and what's my next step? And that's what Steve I thought did really well to kind of to show that.
We're testing this out with you. It's a real shift to move from educating about climate to getting people engaged in doing something with it.
Yeah.
And we're looking for every on-ramp we can to make it easy to make that transition.
Yeah, if you have any thoughts there, please pass them on, because that's our next bastion on this.
When you mentioned running a workshop and sending it out to PV Forum, is that something you're actually planning to do, or you just kind of mentioned that hypothetically?
No, I will. I'm not quite ready for it, but absolutely. I'd like to.
You already did it. Didn't you already do it once, Steve? Well, you did send out a notification.
Not with this workshop.
Oh.
I've done that with other workshops just
Okay.
because we want to offer workshops to the community, you know, as
Okay.
community service. But
I guess I was wondering from the standpoint of, are you looking for us as a committee to do something, to sponsor something or something like that, that we would go and decide if we want to do that or not, or you already have your plan and you're going to do it and sit down in PV Forum?
I wouldn't say PV Forum isn't really a plan. It's just a vehicle to use ad hoc. And it's it'll attract a certain audience. I think the opportunity for you as a sustainability committee to evaluate is, do we want to sponsor a session, I think as Scott said, open to the public and promote it as, come learn about different climate scenarios that are effective, and we'll give you a chance to experiment hands-on with, how we can create a more livable world. I think that will have a lot of that hands-on aspect has a lot of appeal. If we do it virtually, how many of you, I'm just curious, how many of you, as I was doing the sliders, kind of played with your own version on a browser to say, what if I did this? What if I did that? Yeah. Yeah, almost all of you. Rebecca, did you do it too? So all of you. I do it too. Like, why listen to some presenter drill and I say, okay, let me check this, let me check that. It's kind of that's what really hooks people. Just listening doesn't do anything,
And I
right?
think it's really important to have somebody there when people are doing it, especially for the first time, or even playing with it slightly offline, somebody who can answer the questions. Because I mean, just in this little group, we had some really good questions about how do what does this really mean? How did you get the data? Where does the data come from?
Right.
Trade-offs and so forth. And I think with the population of Portola Valley, you're going to get a lot of questions.
Yeah.
You're
A lot of questions. You get, yeah,
I think so.
right. All right.
You're going to need the chat.
Yeah.
So, yeah, this has been really great, Steve and Laura, really, really very interesting and fun to work with you on this. And it's clear we'll at our next meeting, we'll talk about the experience we've had and think about other ways we can help get the word out, and whether we want to actually sponsor an event. That's possible. We've just established better contact with the Woodside Sustainability Group, and I don't know if you've ever spoken to them, but that's another avenue to, and maybe there's a joint thing. I mean, I'm just speculating, but we need to talk about it among ourselves about what we might want to do. I think the point of going straight from the simulation to, and here's how you can get involved is a really good one. And that was a question, I think, in the back of our minds before we met with you, which was, okay, so you got this simulation tool and it's basically going to show people how hard it is to get to 2.22 degrees. And, we don't want them to walk away with just a sense of, well, we're never going to make it. So giving an outlet for action seems really important. So I think, while we as a committee might not be able to, support, validate one particular group, the notion of having concrete actions people can take coming out of such a workshop is really good. Really
Yeah.
important.
I'm glad to hear that. I wasn't sure exactly how this would go either and what we would learn together, but I also have the sense, having walked this through with you, that it's so important to give people a chance to make a difference personally. So they feel empowered. They feel like they can be part of a solution rather than the victim of a problem that is created by others. So, and I have no problem with taking a very inclusive approach to saying, look, anything that is, as long as, it's effective. If we can, that means influencing lawmakers, regulators, people in power, who make the policies, as well as influencing individuals to take personal action.
Okay. Any
Okay.
last thoughts, Jay, or anybody else? Rebecca, Jay? No? Okay. All right, well, I guess we can adjourn then. Thank you again. That was great. Really good.
Thank you very much for your participation and openness, and really glad to do it. And thank you, Laura. Laura's in Atlanta, so it's now coming up on 11 o'clock. Is that right? 8 o'clock?
It
Yeah,
is.
11.
Yes.
She said she'd take a nap in order to get here today. I'm glad she did. You sure don't look tired, Laura, but
Yeah.
thanks for staying up late.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good
Thanks
to
a
meet
lot.
you all.
All
And
right.
Steve, are
Thank you
you
very
gonna
much.
send around those slides? Is that the plan?
Yeah, can I just send that to one person or to?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Give me an
you can
email?
Send it to
Send it
me
to
and
you, Scott.
I'll distribute it, and we'll also make sure it gets put together with the minutes for the meeting. Yeah,
Sounds great.
yeah.
I'll do
Thank
that.
you.
Give me till tomorrow to kind of take out some of the excess ones we didn't use, so.
Okay.
Okay, thanks so much,
All right.
everybody.
Night, everybody.
Bye.
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 Night.